Thank you, Kimmo, for finding time for this interview for Murrosagentti. So you are active here in the region. Would you like to share with us a bit? Yes, Murrosagentti.
I have this nice murrosagentti team, so
yes, nice. Mine is on my coat, but right. Very nice. Okay, so would you like to share a bit about your activities around change and sustainability, art also?
Well, that's quite a wide question. You know, because there's at least 3 threads in my life that are quite deeply connected to this kind of transition. Mostly I see it as like a cultural transition. That's why I call myself cultural gardener. So my approach to my work and also to my art is kind of as through a metaphor of gardening. So instead of before, say like in my previous life, I was more like a facilitator and service designer and designer, also like a visual designer. But that approach comes from the position where you think that human animals are capable of actually designing their surroundings and deciding what is good and what is bad and how it should be. It's a bit of like a God delusion, in my opinion, and it's kind of putting other nature and human nature in the different like levels. Of course, that's not the truth about how things are in the universe, and I think as like through the metaphor of gardening, I'm slowly getting into actually finding out what it is to work with nature and consider other nature than human nature, and also kind of getting a deeper understanding of human nature, the entanglement of human nature with other nature, even in our bodies. You know that in our bodies there is more cells of other nature than human nature. Like the human nature cells are in the minority. Of course, the microbes and bacteria, they are very small, but anyway. Okay, that was like a long explanation for that background. So in all my work, I'm kind of seeing it as working on the cultural soil. So seeing that we have a cultural compost from our previous, from our ancestors and from our grandparents and our parents and the previous generations, and even.
Sorry, by cultural you mean like social cultural or artistic?
Both. Also scientific, like we have our knowledge is also kind of, it's a layered compost of previous generations, and we have to understand the kind of the threads that are going in there. Like you can see, for example, the thread of human nature separating from other nature, which starts like 2,500 years ago, basically with the Stoics in Greece. They kind of started to define a human as something rational that is different from other nature. And that kind of divide just deepens from there on. So it's a long thread.
Yes.
And that causes lots of things, like in our history, for our history of science also, like when there's like this mechanistic thread, and then there is this thread that is more like in consideration of the entanglement of different natures, and not trying to explain everything in like a minute detail.
More holistic.
More holistic, yeah. Right. So with that background, my artwork is more into kind of I do like performance art mostly, and visual art, and it's more like into, I call it the laboratory or social laboratory or laboratory of self, because in these situations of performance, I have some rules, I have some boundaries, but it's more like a laboratory happening with the audience. Okay. So the audience is part of the social laboratory. So it's like researching in an artistic way, of not very serious like academic research, but more like academic artistic research. And then in my work, that's not simple, because I work with 3 companies, and one is with financing, ethical financing, mostly crowdfunding. Then the second one, jälleenrakentajat, is about creating tools and practices of eco-socio-cultural transition that can be tested hyperlocally and then scaled. Like I would call it, it's like a mycelium-like organization that aims to find the spots where there is serious need of transition, and then find the resources, the knowledge, money, space, and people that have the energy and will to work on that transition, and then connect this to create a tool or practice, some sort of a recipe that can be acted on at that need. Okay.
And why the financial crowdfunding platform you're working with? Can you also share a bit more?
Yeah, in Eitara, I'm mostly working on something that called the deck of cards. You can see some here. Okay. It's a tool for, like, each card has one exercise, one game. I call them games. One kind of mini game that helps a group of people. It can be a company, it can be just like a loose group of people, it can be association. Anyway, something that is working on a project, or they have a need that they need to fulfill somehow, and they come together and they need resources. So they have to create a good plan for getting resources. Mostly what we focus on is doing that through crowdfunding, but that can be other kind of business idea also. So the deck of cards, it's like a map guiding you through the process in a form of games.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the groups are Finnish groups that are working with this deck? Entrepreneurs or people willing to create any kind of project or what?
It's that we have been working with some startups, both from the English-speaking community in Tampere, and then some Finnish people, Finnish companies, then some more like fourth sector, maybe like not really associations, but more like groups of people working together to create something.
Okay. So from what I understand about your activities, do you have this desire to change things, or is it more that you observe them and go with the flow and find a way to transform, working very much with what's there, instead of defining change as an idea, you thinking that, oh, this should be like that, and I'm going to start my journey to explain to people how things should be. You see what I mean? Like,
yeah, I know. I know exactly what you mean, and I think I have been in the space or a moment that I was thinking that I could actually change things. It's part of the God delusion, I think. It's like, but as a gardener, after several burnouts in the startup world and so on, now as a gardener, I have a more loose, more gentle approach to the transition and change. I think it's like it's a lot about nudging. It's also a lot about nudging in a sense of changing little things in the culture, like words, what kind of words we use about things that we do. Like one of the major changes for me was that I changed the title from a service designer or like a specialist or expert to culture gardener. And it was more of a joke when I started with that, but quite soon I noticed that actually how I call myself makes a big difference in how I see things and how I experience things and how I talk about things. So this kind of changes have a much bigger meaning in the long term than if you have a 2-year project that creates something and then after the project is gone, it's just like goes to the compost.
This approach resonates a lot for me because when I landed in Finland, I chose Finland because I thought this was a good soil to plant the seed of the social impact company I was willing to create. And it's true that also gardening is teaching us humility. And also that we depend, like our actions are also connected to forces that are way bigger than us. But yeah, your approach is very, very interesting. And I think you have been working with Platform 6 and Startupper. And how do they receive this approach? For example, I don't know, startups from game industry or,
where it's interesting. I think it's a long, and if you one of the aspects of gardening is that you can't expect change in one cycle of nature. Some changes happen in like because you work on the soil. So first year you probably don't get much crop. Next year it's maybe a bit better. But after 5 years, maybe there's sudden flourishing because the soil has healed and it has more nutrients, and it's more. It creates space for things to grow. So, in a sense, I think most important part of my work is creating space for things and creating space in the long term, like believing that if I believe in these people and if I give them like right kind of feedback and possibilities, opportunities, little nudges, then things will change, but it will take time.
Okay.
And I can see things changing and kind of some ideas picking up. Let's see, we have something going on for this autumn, and it's another opportunity to see how it is possible to align with startup world, and is it possible to kind of steer it a bit towards more sustainable and ethical ways of doing things.
Right. And it would be interesting also to hear from you the changes or transformations you have observed in the Finnish society towards transition. So there are the big government announcements, the show off, but there are also very concrete and real transformation that are supported by the government. And there are the people, the workers, the startuppers, the entrepreneurs, the artists, of course. So and the Finnish society is very connected to sustainability and environment, much more than other society. I mean, it's well known that Scandinavian countries are more conscious than other countries. But according to you, like when you were a teenager and now, like, have you observed that the society is moving towards a transition towards more justice, more consciousness, more equality, diversity, etc.?
Certainly, there is diversity in that, because it's going, or at least I have a feeling that there's some sort of division. That there's part of Finland and Finnish culture that it has advanced quite a lot. I would say in 20 years, even with in my bubble, say that 20 years ago, we were quite ignorant and somewhat toxic in the ways that we interacted with each other, even though that we were the kind of the people that were supposed to be on the moral high ground and kind of like, we know the shit. But we were really, really kind of childish in that, really ignorant.
Okay.
And there's been a lot of progress. And I think in a way it's also some, like also like say the startup culture. Now lately I've been able to speak with people about burnouts and how toxic a lot of the startup culture is in its like ultra focused aim on some sort of unicorn dream.
Yes.
Which is more important than people or nature or anything else. 5 years ago, it was impossible. Like you could talk about sustainability or things like that as a side note, but you wouldn't really be able to speak about how the actual startup culture is not very healthy.
Okay.
But now I think we are getting there. And it's a big step, because that leads, because when people accept that, hey, they are kind of part of nature and not machinery, that they have limits, that they have to be gentle towards themselves and the others, and maybe towards the nature also, then there's a big potential. But then on the other side of the divide, there are like the people who don't have the means to deal with their traumas or fears or lack of knowledge, or who are not able to keep up the change or progress, and because of that fear or sense of not having agency, they are kind of locking up, and they're kind of going to the other direction, saying like, no, we don't want this change. This is not good change for us. We instead kind of
want to continue,
become hostile and kind of.
And so, do you think, because the communication is very key in all these processes, right? The way we speak, the word we choose, and also the way we rely to our history, right? And it's not that it seems to me, the Finnish culture is not super expensive. Like, people are not sharing easily, quickly, usually. And I understood that the discussion about the past, what happened with the grandfathers and all this, was not that easy. And there is a trauma, it seems, for Finns, for your generation and maybe the next one, like, to deal with all this. It's heavy. And I was wondering, in that compost that you were referring to, how do you see that composting? Do you think that the discussion will happen at regional or family level? Like, there is a cleansing that is needed a little bit like we had in France with the colonial wars, for example. It was completely locked for decades, and then it started. We had to talk about it. Films documentaries had to be produced, showing what happened, etc. So do you have a few thoughts to share about that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's very important point, because lots of these fears and lack of agency come from these traumas that we can't process, that we can't even approach, that are just there in the compost, and they're kind of making the compost dead. They're like the toxic material in the compost. And if you think of like in the sense of biomimicry, then what would you need? It would be like some mycelium there to because mycelium can process toxic into something useful, like into nutrition.
Yes, yes. Would you like to explain a bit biomimicry and mycelium? Maybe not everybody is aware of what this.
So biomimicry is like a way of learning from nature to use in the ways that we approach things. Like most usual examples of biomimicry are like maybe in design, where you can have some shapes of nature and then take it to the industrial design and notice that this shape actually works very well for the acoustics, or this shape works very, very well for this part of the machinery, or something like that. But it's also, I think that it can be also useful for maybe like social sciences, or like how we approach our culture or organizations. And when I'm talking about mycelium, so we know that there is it has been a very good autumn for mushrooms. And mushrooms are fruiting bodies of mycelium. And for the fruiting bodies of mycelium, the mushrooms, there is huge mycelial networks. All these little threads, they're called hyphae, under the earth. They say that under every footstep, there's 500 kilometers of mycelium. So there's a lot of different threads in the soil. And that makes the soil healthy, because the mycelium, it takes the nutrition from other different species to different species. It's like a logistical network, like not just a logistical network, but it's also like the internet of the soil, because it also gives information from plants to others.
Right, right. So you think that this trauma, to come back to this, collective trauma could be, and it's true, they are really sterilizing also the goodwill sometimes. Like, it's very, very tiring to have to deal with this trauma, but obviously nobody can be forced to deal with if they don't feel like it. So do you think that it would be more that cultural mycelium and right alignment, wrapping these untold or unspoken traumas and progressively, bringing life into this and reducing them? Or would it be healthier to take that compost, open it, dig out the trauma, bringing it to oxygen, and have, like, maybe, I don't know, collective talk about it? It could be a decision. We could see, for example, tomorrow in each town of Finland, a group saying, okay, now we talk about the war and what happened, and join us into this circle, and then let's talk about it, a kind of big collective cleansing.
I think it would be useful in some form. I'm thinking that is it better to kind of just, it may be quite brutal to just like dig out the whole compost and you can lose something in that process.
Okay.
But maybe you can kind of, because also if it's kind of closed and rigid, maybe the mycelium can't get in there, or they even can't get close to it. So maybe you can have to kind of dig holes to it or something, and make space for mycelium to approach there. So maybe you need first some worms that kind of dig into that,
and gently bring a little bit of oxygen and azote.
It's because of course the worms can't enter the toxic earth. But the worms can make the channels for the spores of the mycelium to get to air.
Okay, so a cultural gardener would be like a worm in that metaphor.
Yeah, I think so. It's probably more like a worm than like a shovel. You know, it's not like.
Okay. Yeah.
But more like, yeah.
Okay.
Or maybe it's more also, lots of different worms.
Yes, which is also a way to gently invite to change, right? It's also
like I said, this like creating space is the main thing. And in this sense, to talk about traumas, you need to create safe space to talk about the traumas, so that it doesn't get. If you just like kind of aggressively or brutally open up the grave and just like start okay, let's get this all out, and like that's maybe not safe for many people to actually talk about it. Maybe it creates like a situation where the people who are already kind of feeling able to talk about it are going to fill up the space.
Right.
So that's not really getting down to the problem. It's just like creating a sense of, now we are talking about this.
No, I hear you. But what I had in mind was also more that the circumstances could reactivate these very painful traumas in the society. As for example, this is a time of crisis, multiple layer, complex crisis, even though Finland is still protected compared to so many other countries, and we are very happy here, and a lot of resources and security and freedom. Still, these big fears, the eco-anxiety, the fear for lack of money, for total collapse, the war, the list is very long. And I was thinking in terms of a system, society as a system, that this thing, can also push, and reactivate all these traumatic memories at a collective level. And you are very right that creating safe space is very key. Like, for example, the murrosagentti, the discussions were a very safe space for each one of us to express ourselves, get to know each other and all this, and hopefully each one of us will pollinate and create other safe spaces for people to come and share. That was more in that perspective that I was thinking that maybe it could be interesting to open some discussions. I don't know, but it's a very complex issue for sure. Because it seems to me that we are a little bit pushed because these crises are accelerating, right? Heavily. The feeling of emergency is there, and working on trauma, gardening are very slow processes. So you plant
there's a cognitive dissonance about that. Like you feel that you need to do a lot, but then there are these slow processes that you can't really speed up. Or you can, but that's not natural anymore. That's kind of, then you have to add something that you don't know how it will change the process in the long term.
Yes. So how do you deal with that, with all your actions?
It's not easy, and it's like I have to say that I also kind of I struggle with that every day, I think, and it's also one thing that we should be talking more about, this kind of, that we know, because we have also this sense in this culture that we have to look strong, we have to look like we are winning, we have to look like we are doing well and we have everything is nice and we are actually doing a little bit better than the neighbor. I don't know where that narrative comes from, but it's very strong.
Me neither. Yeah.
And I think it's also important that we start to talk about that but everyone struggles, and everyone has the kind of pain points and doubts, and like there is all kind of things going on here, like and somehow to share that process. I mean, I've been working with my sister a lot about our kind of family history or family traumas, which a lot of that is kind of shared trauma with most of the Finns. It comes from the war and so on. But somehow we should kind of get to spread that discussion. It's good to have that in the family, but it would be even better to have that kind of discussion in a wider network of people.
Yes.
To kind of slowly start to progress in that, so that it would spread through the culture.
Okay, yes. And where is your motivation coming from to continue to do everything you do, to believe in it, no matter the obstacles or difficulties?
It's a good question. I have this meditation that I do quite often, that there's this 3 questions, like, who are you? What do you need? What do you want? And what is your dharma? What is your purpose? And every time I do that meditation, I'm totally like, with every question, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. I don't know what is my purpose.
Okay.
But I'm curious to look for that. So I think maybe one of the main motivations is curiosity.
Okay.
And maybe some other one is somehow to kind of, I think I find purpose in being able to help others somehow. So in that's, of course, I also have children, so I feel also responsibility for them to at least try to give them like a world, or the tiny piece of the world that is at the current state. I can almost say that it's not so much worse than where I started at.
Okay.
Of course, there's some things that are better, but there's a lot of things that are kind of not so good.
Okay. And my last question would be like, was there an event or meeting with someone or something that triggered you when you were younger to engage in that journey, or was it that you were raised in a family that was very open to all these ideas?
That's interesting. I haven't really been thinking about that. But I maybe I have to think about it a bit. There might have been some moment, but what was it actually that kind of... I think one part, I have one guide with me that I return to. She's unfortunately not alive anymore, and her name is Ursula Le Guin. So as a teenager, I was reading a lot of science fiction, and I was reading a lot of Ursula Le Guin's books also. Mm-hmm. And I think they kind of planted the seed in me, partially at least. There might have been other, but I think a lot of it comes from the literature. As a teenager, I was a very avid reader. I was like eating books. Okay. I didn't have social life. I've actually, when you think of that, then the other part maybe I was a nerd playing role-playing games with my nerdy friends. But role-playing actually, it has a lot of elements of like imagining things and dealing with your surroundings through imagining things, and kind of trying to see yourself through some imaginary being, which is your character, which may be like elf or dwarf or something that is very different from me. So I think that's also part of what is kind of creating this kind of flexibility in my brains. Okay. For that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. And okay, maybe I will ask you the same questions in a year or two from now and see if how your answer change or what you have observed. That's really
that would be interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Bye-bye. It was
a nice, very interesting discussion.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.